Welcome to the Book Nook, everyone. You know, usually when you look at a map, there is this underlying expectation of total precision.
Right. It feels like an engineering document, honestly.
Exactly. You want to get from point A to point B, and the map just shows you a solid, brightly colored line. The navigator points at the paper and just says, there it is, just follow the line. It's
Mm-hmm.
completely binary. You are either on the designated road or you're off the road.
Which is an incredibly clean way of viewing the world. And humans are, are deeply drawn to that kind of categorization.
Oh, absolutely.
We constantly crave the visible, the structured, the predictable stuff.
Right, because it's profoundly comforting.
Yeah.
But then you actually step out of the car and into the lived experience of human existence.
Yeah, that's where the map fails.
Totally. You encounter the sudden tragedies, the completely unexpected detours, the betrayals you never saw coming, and suddenly that perfectly engineered map is completely useless.
Because you realize you aren't on a paved highway at all.
No, not even close. We are looking at a navigational landscape that is, well, it's murky, it's chaotic.
It's the absolute definition of navigational muddy waters.
Yeah.
I mean, the lines blur, the terrain shifts, and those comforting binaries of safe and unsafe just completely dissolve.
And that muddy, shifting terrain is exactly what we are wading into today. So, welcome back to the Book Nook. If you've been a part of this community for a while, you know that we explore the most impactful and transformative books in self-help, spirituality, psychology, and personal growth.
And today's deep dive is definitely going to test some boundaries.
Oh, for sure. Today we are taking a deep dive into a piece of source material that tackles this exact problem of chaos. We're looking at 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos by clinical psychologist Jordan B. Peterson.
Along with the incredibly framing insights from the foreword written by Dr. Norman Deutsch.
Yes. Our mission today isn't just to read off a list of rules to you. We want to deeply unpack the biological and mythological framework the author uses so you can understand how to navigate the inevitable suffering of life.
Without letting that suffering turn you bitter, which is a huge distinction.
It is, because the source material doesn't shy away from the heaviest, darkest aspects of the human condition.
No, it really looks directly at the suffering, the malevolence, the tragedy of existence.
Mm-hmm.
But before we even get into the psychological architecture of all that, what's fascinating here is the origin story of how this specific book came to exist.
It's wild, honestly.
Especially considering the academic density of the author's previous work.
Right, because the subject matter is so profound. We're talking about the fundamental nature of being. But the book itself was essentially born out of internet procrastination.
Literally.
The author was on Quora. And for those of you who might not know, Quora is this website where literally anyone can post a question, anyone can write an answer, and then the community upvotes the best responses.
Right.
So he's taking a break, admittedly avoiding his actual academic work, and he decides to answer this seemingly simple question. What are the most valuable things everyone should know?
And he just dashed off a list of maxims. I mean, some of them were deeply serious, drawing on his clinical practice, and some were a bit more tongue-in-cheek.
Like the skateboarding one we'll get to later.
Exactly.
Mm.
But the reaction from the internet was just explosive. The statistics provided in the text are really telling. His answer received over 120,000 views.
Wow.
And 2,300 upvotes.
Mm.
And to put that in context, on a platform with hundreds of thousands of active questions, breaking that 2,000 upvote barrier places a post in the extreme upper echelon of engagement.
It's like the 99.9th percentile. And what I think is so crucial about that core audience is that they are anonymous, and largely unbiased. They weren't reading this list because it was assigned to them in a university seminar or because they actively went out and bought a self-help book. They were just scrolling the internet, and this list struck a massive chord.
It provided a type of structure that people were clearly starting for. And to understand why that structure resonated so deeply, you really have to look at Peterson's background. As we mentioned, he is a clinical psychologist and a professor at the University of Toronto.
Right.
But prior to this, his primary published work was a book called Maps of Meaning. And that previous book is notoriously dense.
I mean, I've looked at it, and it is a brick.
It is an incredibly complex academic synthesis of history, mythology, evolutionary biology, neuroscience, and psychoanalysis. He literally spent decades trying to figure out this terrifying question. Why would human beings be willing to risk the total nuclear destruction of the world to protect their belief systems during the Cold War?
Which is not exactly light beach reading.
Not at all. It requires a tremendous amount of effort to parse.
Right.
But this Corpus, and subsequently the book we are diving into today, represents a distillation of all that.
A very necessary translation.
Yeah, it takes decades of that highly complex interdisciplinary research and translates it into an accessible, practical guide for living in the modern world.
And the modern world is exactly where Dr. Norman Doidge starts his foreword. He points out this unique dilemma that millennials, and honestly, anyone living in modern Western society, are currently caught in.
It's a tough spot to be in.
Because we have essentially been taught two completely contradictory ideas at the exact same time. On one hand, we are saturated in moral relativism.
Right.
This is the idea that right and wrong are just cultural accidents. It's the belief that there is no absolute good or absolute evil. There are just, different frameworks based on the geography and the era you happen to be born into.
And within that relativistic system, tolerance is elevated to the absolute highest possible virtue.
Exactly. The logic being that if nothing is objectively, transcendently true, then judging anyone else's lifestyle or culture is seen as not just intellectually flawed, but actively dangerous.
But the text argues that human beings are, at our biological core, moral animals. We are rule generators.
We can't help it.
We can't. Our nervous systems are wired to seek out patterns of value, so we actually cannot tolerate the vacuum that moral relativism creates.
Because if you strip away all overarching ideals and tell a generation that nothing truly matters more than anything else, you don't get a utopia of pure tolerance.
No, you get nihilism.
Yeah.
You are left with anxiety and a profound sense of despair.
Because nature abhors a vacuum. If you empty a room of all its air, something is going to rush in to fill it.
And what rushes into this moral vacuum, according to the text, is the exact opposite of relativism-blind ideology.
Right. People who feel completely uncertain and adrift are suddenly magnetized toward hyper-judgmental, rigid belief systems that claim to have a simple, absolute answer for everything.
Now, I want to make sure we are clear here, as we are impartially reporting the source material. We're not taking sides, just exploring the argument. The text critiques what it identifies as a postmodernist left perspective, which it says often promotes the idea that society is nothing but a power struggle between different identity groups, and that morality is just a tool used by the powerful to oppress the marginalized.
Right.
The author argues this strips away individual agency, but simultaneously, the text explicitly cautions against the dangers on the other end of the spectrum, to right-wing bigotry and totalitarian ideologies.
Right, those simple-minded, I-know-it-all approaches.
Exactly. It points out that those rigid extremes are incredibly dangerous and historically murderous when they acquire state power. The author's argument is just that both of these extremes leave young people without a reliable internal moral compass.
They are completely deprived of what the ancient philosophers would have called practical wisdom. Okay, let's unpack this. To find that practical wisdom, the author says we need to understand the fundamental framework of reality, order and chaos. Can you break that down for us?
Sure, so let's look at order first. Order is explored territory. It is the social structure that you already understand.
It's a familiar stuff.
Yeah, it's the familiarity of your daily routine. To use a literary analogy from the text, order is the Shire in Tolkien's The Hobbit.
Oh, I love that comparison.
Right. It is peaceful, productive, agricultural, and incredibly safe. Order is the feeling you have when the trains are running on time, when you're sitting in your living room with a loyal friend.
Everything is just functioning as expected.
Exactly. To use a physical metaphor from the book, order is the experience of standing on solid, thick ice.
You don't even think about the ice beneath your feet because it's holding you up. It's totally dependable. But chaos is when that thick ice suddenly cracks and gives way.
It is the unexplored territory.
It's the unexpected. Chaos is the moment you walk to your mailbox thinking you're getting a tax refund, and instead you open a letter saying you're being audited by the government.
Nobody plans to the audit.
Right. Chaos is the sudden, terrifying illness. It's the betrayal by a spouse who you thought you knew perfectly. It's the sudden loss of a career. So if order is driving your car to work on autopilot, completely relaxed and listening to the radio, chaos is the exact moment you're going 60 miles an hour down the highway, you press the brake pedal, and it goes completely to the floor with no resistance. In a millisecond, your entire reality shifts from safe to terrifying.
And that millisecond shift is crucial to understand because it reveals that these two forces are not geographically separated. They are superimposed on top of each other at all times.
Right.
The text connects this profound duality to the ancient Taoist symbol of the yin and yang. You picture the circle containing the two serpents head to tail.
The black and white ones.
Exactly. The white serpent represents order. The black serpent represents chaos.
Yeah.
But the brilliance of that ancient symbol is the dots inside the serpents.
Yes.
The black serpent of chaos has a white dot in its head, and the white serpent of order has a black dot in its head.
Which means they are completely interchangeable. Even in the safest, most orderly, rigorously controlled environment, a white dot of chaos can suddenly manifest. You can be sitting in your perfectly clean house, doors locked, and suddenly you feel a pain in your chest.
The chaos was inside the order the whole time.
Exactly. But the reverse is also true. Even in the darkest tragedy, a new order can emerge.
Precisely. And the ultimate goal, the true meaning of life, according to this framework, isn't to just hide inside the white serpent of order forever.
Right, you can't just lock yourself in your room.
If you try to eliminate all chaos, your life becomes tyrannical, it becomes stagnant, you become a totalitarian dictator of your own life.
Oh.
But you also can't live entirely in chaos, or you will be overwhelmed by anxiety and dissolve. The psychological goal is to walk the exact border between the two.
1 foot in order, 1 foot in chaos.
You keep 1 foot firmly planted in order and security so you're stable, and you tentatively place the other foot out into chaos and possibility so you can encounter new things, learn, and expand your competence.
That razor's edge is where meaning is actually found, and understanding that razor's edge perfectly sets up the very first rule of the book. And I have to admit, when I first read the title of this rule, it sounded so simplistic.
It does sound a bit cliche at first.
Right. It sounds like something a strict school teacher would yell at you in the hallway. Rule 1, stand up straight with your shoulders back. But the biological and evolutionary depth the author goes into here is staggering. He starts talking about wrens and lobsters.
Yeah, he uses the animal kingdom to provide incredibly clear, undeniable examples of how these abstract forces of order and chaos manifest in the physical biological world.
Especially regarding territory.
Exactly, how creatures navigate territory, status, and survival.
The story he tells about the wren is so vivid. He talks about being a 10-year-old kid and building a little wooden birdhouse with his dad. They drilled this tiny little hole in it, perfectly sized for a wren, which is this tiny, hyperactive, insect-eating songbird. And they also built a second, larger birdhouse out of an old rubber boot for their elderly neighbor's yard.
Right, trying to be nice.
Yeah. Well, a wren moves into the little birdhouse on his lawn. But then this tiny bird starts carrying sticks one by one over to the neighbor's rubber boot, and it packs the boot completely full of sticks. It preemptively sabotaged the competition's real estate, so no other birds could possibly move in and compete for the local insects.
It is a ruthless, calculated assertion of territorial dominance. The wren is ensuring its own survival by manipulating the environment against its competitors.
It is absolutely merciless, and the story gets even better. The author, as a kid, gets a cassette recorder. He records the wren's specific territorial trilling song, and then he plays it back on the lawn through the speaker.
Oh, no.
And this tiny bird, which is maybe a third the size of a common sparrow, hears the song of arrival and starts kamikaze dive bombing him and the cassette recorder.
That's incredible.
It is willing to fight a giant human and a plastic machine to defend its territory. And this dynamic brings us to the lobsters, because lobsters are doing the exact same territorial dance at the bottom of the ocean.
They are. And the reason the text focuses on lobsters is highly specific. Lobsters possess a relatively simple nervous system, one that has large neurons that have been mapped very accurately by scientists. They live on the ocean floor, hunting for prey and scavenging. And just like the wren, they need a secure home base, a good hiding spot, to protect them from predators while they molt their shells.
Because they're super vulnerable then.
Exactly. When two lobsters want the same prime piece of oceanic real estate, they don't just share it, they fight.
Obviously.
They engage in a highly structured, escalating dominance dispute. They start by spraying chemicals at each other, then they wave their claws, and if neither backs down, it turns into physical combat.
And the loser gets flipped over or scurries away. But here's the biological hook. What the scientists discovered is that the neural circuitry of these lobsters, which dictates their posture, their aggression, and their confidence in these fights, runs on a specific chemical. It runs on serotonin,
Right.
which is the exact same neurotransmitter that regulates mood, confidence, and hierarchy in human beings.
It is a direct neurochemical parallel. When a lobster wins a fight, its brain is flooded with serotonin. The serotonin literally changes the flexor muscles in the lobster's body.
It puffs up.
It stretches out, it looks physically larger, and it struts around claiming the best territory. It becomes a dominant lobster.
Wow.
Conversely, the defeated lobster experiences a massive drop in serotonin. It curls up, it looks physically smaller, and it slinks away to hide in the less desirable, more dangerous territory. The neurochemistry literally alters their physical posture.
Okay, so as I was reading this, I found myself instinctively wanting to push back because the modern cultural narrative I hear all the time is that the dominance hierarchy, the idea of winners and losers, of people having different status levels, is just a socially constructed phenomenon.
Sure, that's a very common critique.
Like it's just a byproduct of capitalism or a flaw in Western civilization or the result of the patriarchy. The assumption is that if we just organize society differently, the hierarchy would disappear. But wait, isn't a dominance hierarchy just a modern human invention?
Well, that is exactly the assumption the text completely dismantles. The biological argument presented here is that the dominance hierarchy is emphatically not a cultural artifact.
It's not an invention of human society.
No, it is 500 million years old. It existed before human beings existed. It existed before mammals existed. The dominance hierarchy is older than trees. It existed before creatures even had skin or bones.
That fundamentally flips the script on how we view nature itself.
It does. We often have this romanticized, Disney-like view of nature as a static, harmonious backdrop. Beautiful landscape where animals just coexist peacefully.
Right, singing birds and friendly deer.
Exactly. But the text argues that nature is the selecting agent. It is a dynamic, deadly, continuous dance of survival and status. And because the dominance hierarchy has been around for 350 to 500 billion years, it is a permanent aspect of that selective environment.
It's basically baked into the code.
It is as real as gravity. Therefore, our brains and our bodies are hardwired at the deepest evolutionary level to constantly assess where we stand in that hierarchy.
Which means our posture is broadcasting our internal state to the world, and the world is broadcasting it back to us. If you slouch, if you hunch your shoulders forward and look down at the ground, you are physically signaling defeat. You are telling the ancient dominance calculator in your own brain, and in the primitive brains of everyone who looks at you, that you are at the bottom of the hierarchy.
And the tragic result is that your brain responds to that physical posture.
Yes. By lowering your serotonin, increasing your stress hormone cortisol, and making you hyper-reactive to negative emotions, you literally invite negative feedback from other people because you look like an easy target.
So when the author says, stand up straight with your shoulders back, he isn't giving you cosmetic advice on how to look nicer for a family photograph.
It's not just good manners.
Right. It is a profound philosophical and biological assertion. By physically opening up your posture, you are voluntarily deciding to confront the chaos of the world. You are accepting the terrible responsibility of life.
You are telling your own nervous system, I am not a defeated creature hiding from predators. I am ready to encounter the unknown.
Exactly. You're ready to transform the chaos of potential into habitable order.
You are encouraging the serotonin to flow. And that chemical shift calms your anxiety, it makes you more socially adept, it makes you more articulate, and it genuinely increases the probability that good things will happen to you because people treat confident people better. Standing tall is accepting that terrible responsibility.
It is the biological prerequisite for taking on the suffering of the world without collapsing.
That is incredibly empowering. But moving from that physical assertion of self into the deeply psychological realm, we hit a bizarre contradiction in human behavior. The second rule is, treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. And the text drops a statistical reality here that honestly stopped me in my tracks. Imagine a scenario where 100 people go to the doctor, they're diagnosed with an illness, and they are prescribed a crucial medication.
Okay.
According to the text, 1/3 of those people won't even go to the pharmacy to fill the prescription. Half of the remaining people will fill it, but they won't take it correctly. They'll skip doses, or they'll just quit taking it as soon as they feel slightly better.
It is a massive systemic failure of self-care.
But here is the massive kicker. Those exact same people, if their pet dog gets sick, they will take the dog to the vet, get a prescription, and they will meticulously, perfectly administer that medication to the dog every single time, exactly on schedule.
Wow.
So what does this all mean? Why do we care for our dogs better than ourselves? If we are biologically wired to fight for survival and status like the lobster, why are human beings the only creatures on the planet that actively neglect their own well-being while caring for an animal?
To answer this profound contradiction, The text dives deep into the mythological architecture of the human psyche.
Oh,
Specifically, it analyzes the story of the Garden of Eden from the book of Genesis.
right.
Now, it is important to understand that the author isn't treating this story as literal historical dogma. He is analyzing it as a profound psychological articulation of the human condition, a story that evolved over thousands of years to explain why we feel the way we do.
An architect.
Exactly. In this story, Adam and Eve are in this state of unreflective paradise. But then they eat the forbidden fruit, and their eyes are opened, and the very first thing they realize is their own nakedness.
And nakedness here isn't just about needing clothes, it's a metaphor for vulnerability. They realize they are soft, fragile, and completely unprotected.
Precisely. They become self-conscious. This is the great dividing line between humans and the rest of the animal kingdom. A dog just lives in the present moment.
Right, a dog isn't worrying about its taxes.
Exactly. It is innocent, it is reactive, it doesn't ruminate on its past mistakes, and it doesn't dread its future demise. But humans possess self-awareness. We know exactly how vulnerable we are. We know our capacity for physical and emotional pain.
Yeah.
And, crucially, the fruit they eat gives them the knowledge of good and evil.
Which means we know how to hurt other people intentionally.
Yes, that is the defining characteristic of evil. A predator in the wild, a lion taking down a zebra, doesn't have malice.
It's just hungry.
Right, it isn't trying to cause psychological trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But a human being can conceptualize a vulnerability in another person and intentionally exploit it for the sheer perverse joy of causing pain.
Because we know what hurts us, we know exactly how to inflict maximum damage on them.
Exactly. And the tragedy is we know our own capacity for this. We know our own cowardice. We know our own deceitfulness. We know the times we have been petty, jealous, and cruel. We know our own capacity for malevolence.
We have a front row seat to all of our own worst moments, every shameful thought, every lie we've told.
Exactly. And because we know our own flaws so intimately, we secretly despise ourselves. We think, deep down in our subconscious, that we're fallen, corrupt creatures who probably don't deserve to be helped.
Oh, wow.
So when the dog gets sick, we look at the dog and see total innocence. The dog is pure. The dog deserves the medicine. But when we look in the mirror, we see the sinner. We know our own sins, so we neglect ourselves as a form of unconscious punishment.
That is incredibly dark, but it rings so profoundly true. It explains so much self-sabotage. But if we are our own worst critics because we know our own darkness, what is the antidote to that level of ingrained self-contempt?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the text brings in the famous Swiss depth psychologist Carl Jung to address this.
Mm-hmm.
Jung had a fascinating, mathematically precise interpretation of the Golden Rule. Love your neighbor as yourself.
Okay.
He pointed out that this is an equation. It is not just a nice, polite suggestion to be kind to others. If you are morally obligated to treat your neighbor with respect, dignity, and care, the equation demands that you are equally morally obligated to treat yourself with that same respect.
Because you are a locus of divine value just as much as anyone else is.
Exactly. Loving a sinner, loving your flawed neighbor means forgiving them and aiding them when they're stumbling and imperfect. Jung argues you must apply that exact same difficult compassion to the imperfect sinner that is yourself. You are morally obliged to bargain as hard on your own behalf as you would for someone you desperately love.
And it's crucial to clarify here that treating yourself well doesn't mean just giving yourself whatever you want in the moment. The author uses a fantastic analogy here that really grounds it.
The snowsuit analogy.
Yes. If you want to make a child happy in the short term, you just feed them candy all day and let them stay up until 3 a.m. playing video games. But if you want what is actually good for the child, you make them brush their teeth. You force them to put on a snowsuit before they go out in the freezing cold, even if they throw a massive tantrum on the floor.
Because you are taking responsibility for the child's long-term well-being,
Yeah.
you must apply that exact same parental responsibility to yourself.
Right.
You have to ask yourself a very difficult question. What would my life look like if I were genuinely caring for myself properly? What do I need to do? Not what do I want to do, but what do I need to do to improve my health, expand my knowledge, and strengthen my character?
It's about taking yourself seriously.
Because you are important to other people. You have a vital role to play in the unfolding of the world. Neglecting yourself isn't just sad. It is a failure to fulfill your potential and a dereliction of your duty to the fabric of reality.
But what happens when you try to do that? You try to put on your proverbial snowsuit and improve your life, and then you look outside yourself. Because it's one thing to take responsibility for yourself. It's another to look at your neighbor who already has a much nicer snowsuit, a better sled, and is standing on top of a bigger hill.
The comparison trap.
Yes, the self-contempt just rushes right back in. And this brings us to the mechanisms of self-improvement and how we judge our progress. Rule 4 is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And the historical context provided here completely changed how I view social media.
It's a radical shift in the human environment. The text points out that for the vast majority of human history, people lived in very small, geographically isolated communities.
Like villages of maybe 100 people.
Exactly. And in a small town, the dominance hierarchy is relatively flat. Everyone could be a local hero in their own niche. You had the guy who was the best mechanic in town, the kid who was the spelling bee champ, the best basketball player at the local high school. You could enjoy the serotonin rush of being the most competent person in your immediate environment.
You could feel good about your slice of the pie. But today, we are digitally connected to 7 billion people. We carry the entire globe in our pockets.
And because of that connectivity, the hierarchies of accomplishment have become dizzyingly, impossibly vertical. No matter what you're good at, no matter what niche you choose, you can immediately pull out your phone and find a 20-year-old halfway across the world who is vastly superior to you, makes more money than you, and looks better doing it.
It is absolutely crushing to the human psyche. It fuels this vicious internal critic that lives inside all of our heads. I like to think of this internal critic like a rigged game of cards at a corrupt casino where the house always wins.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. Because if you do something well, say you get a promotion at work, the inner voice immediately says, well, so what? Look at Elon Musk. He launched a rocket today. Your promotion is meaningless.
It immediately minimizes the win.
Exactly. But if you fail, the voice completely switches tactics and says, see, you are incompetent and worthless. If that internal voice only denigrates you, no matter what happens, you have to realize the game is rigged. You have to stop listening to that voice as if it were actual objective wisdom.
The text suggests a much more pragmatic, biologically grounded approach to self-improvement. It relies on the psychological fact that human perception is fundamentally goal-directed.
What do you mean?
Well, we do not see the world as an objective array of objects. We literally only see the things that help us or hinder us in achieving our current aim. So if your goal is an impossible standard of global perfection, your brain will only highlight your massive, unbridgeable inadequacies. You will be blind to your own small successes.
So you have to change the aim. You have to lower your sights in a way.
You have to recalibrate downward. You take stock of exactly where you are right now, no matter how messy it is, and you ask yourself a very specific, incredibly humble question. What is one small thing I could do today that I would actually do to make my life slightly better?
Not, how do I fix my entire life, achieve financial independence, and get six-pack abs by noon tomorrow?
No, definitely not.
But rather, what is one tiny bit of chaos I can eradicate on my desk or in my kitchen right now?
Precisely.
Yes.
You find a problem that you are willing to solve, and you solve it. And then, and this is critical, you reward yourself. You allow yourself to feel a sense of accomplishment for cleaning that desk. And then you do it again tomorrow.
It's the compounding effect.
Yes. The text highlights the mathematical magic of compound interest applied to daily habits. If you make your life a tiny fraction of a percent better every single day over the course of 3 years, your life will be entirely transformed. Your baseline of comparison shifts internally. You stop asking, am I better than a billionaire on Instagram? And you start asking, am I slightly more competent today than I was yesterday?
And this incremental, relentless focus on personal responsibility serves as the foundation for what is arguably the most challenging assertion in the book. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. That's rule 6.
It's a heavy one.
When I read this section, I literally had to put the book down for a minute because this is where the author goes into some of the darkest places in modern history to explore the absolute worst-case scenario of failing to take that personal responsibility. He examines the writings and the psychology of mass shooters, specifically analyzing the tragedies at Sandy Hook and Columbine.
It is a harrowing analysis, but it is necessary to understand the extreme pathology of resentment. The text notes that the manifesto of one of the Columbine killers didn't just complain about being bullied, it went much, much deeper.
Yeah.
The killer explicitly claimed that the human race as a whole wasn't worth fighting for, that humanity was only worth killing, and that the existence of being itself was essentially a mistake.
It is the ultimate manifestation of nihilism. It's an indictment of reality itself.
And that is the crucial psychological pivot. When someone experiences the inevitable suffering of life, whether it's rejection, failure, or tragedy, and they completely fail to take personal responsibility for their own reactions and circumstances, that suffering doesn't just go away.
It metastasizes.
Exactly. It turns into a toxic bitterness. And if that bitterness is allowed to fester, the individual stops blaming themselves, and they begin to blame reality itself. They blame society, they blame capitalism, they blame the political system, they blame human nature, and ultimately they blame God or the structure of the universe for creating such a flawed game.
And once you believe that the game itself is evil, then the only logical conclusion is to destroy the game and anyone playing it.
Yes.
The author's synthesis here is incredibly stark and demanding. He argues that before you presume to reorganize the state, before you decide that the entire economic system is corrupt and needs to be violently torn down and rebuilt in your image, you have to look ruthlessly at your own life. Have you made peace with your brother? Are you treating your spouse with respect? Are you working hard at your job? Or are you letting resentment and laziness drag you down?
The injunction is incredibly simple to understand, but immensely difficult to execute. Stop doing what you know is wrong.
Just stop it.
You do not need a complex theological or philosophical debate to know when you are acting deceitfully, when you are betraying a friend, or when you are wasting your potential. Your own conscience, that internal alarm bell, tells you immediately.
Right, you feel it in your gut.
Exactly. Stop doing those things. Stop saying things that make you feel weak and ashamed. Clean up your own life first.
Because if you cannot even bring peace and order to your own messy bedroom or your own family dynamic, how arrogant is it to assume you have the wisdom to rule a city or restructure a national economy?
It's pure hubris.
By ordering your own immediate experience, you stop adding to the overall malevolence of the world. You stop being part of the problem, and you slowly build the psychological and moral strength required to actually bear the tragedies of life without becoming corrupted by them.
You build an internal fortress of character that can withstand the storms of chaos.
It is a profoundly difficult pivot from outward political blame to inward personal action. Now, shifting from how we govern our own internal lives to how we govern the next generation, we arrive at the intense friction of modern parenting.
Oh, this is a controversial one.
Rule 5 is, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. And again, he grounds this in a highly relatable, almost painfully awkward observation. He describes being in a crowded airport and watching a 3-year-old boy trailing behind his parents, and this kid is just screaming violently every 5 seconds.
We've all seen this.
Right. And he wasn't exhausted, he wasn't hungry, he was just doing it voluntarily to get attention, testing the limits, and irritating hundreds of exhausted travelers. And the parents did absolutely nothing. They just stared blankly forward, ignoring the behavior.
Which the text argues is not a display of patience. It is a profound failure of parental courage and responsibility.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Isn't disciplining kids considered restrictive today? As a parent, this is where I feel the most cultural friction. Because the current messaging we get all the time tells us that disciplining a child is crushing their self-expression.
Right.
We're told that kids are naturally perfect and societal rules corrupt them, so it feels wrong or mean to be strict. How does the text justify a return to discipline in the face of that cultural narrative?
Well, the text addresses this modern reluctance head-on, and it completely reframes the purpose of discipline. It argues that the fundamental responsibility of parents is to act as proxies for the real world.
Okay, what does that mean?
Parents are the ambassadors of society. We mentioned earlier that we outsource the problem of our sanity to the crowd.
Right.
We need other people to react to us to know if we're behaving appropriately.
Right.
Well, children don't know the rules of the crowd yet. If a parent refuses to socialize their child, if they let the child behave poorly, bite other kids, kick, scream constantly, or monopolize every conversation, the real world is going to punish that child brutally.
Oh, that's so true.
Other adults will not want that child in their homes. Teachers will not want to invest extra time teaching them. And most tragically, other children will absolutely refuse to play with them.
The child becomes socially isolated. They become an outcast because their parents were too afraid of a temporary tantrum to teach them how to act.
Exactly. But if a parent does the hard, emotionally taxing work of disciplining a child, teaching them how to share, how to pay attention when an adult is speaking, how to regulate their emotions and eat in a civilized manner, that child becomes a joy to be around.
They're invited everywhere.
They become welcome everywhere they go. Adults will smile at them, praise them, and offer them opportunities. Their peers will flock to them and want them on their team. Discipline, in this framework, is emphatically not about oppression or power tripping. It is the ultimate act of parental care. It is equipping the child with the behavioral tools they need to navigate the complex social matrix successfully.
You are building a socially competent human being, which leads beautifully into the next major concept, which honestly has my absolute favorite title in the entire book. Rule 11, do not bother children when they are skateboarding.
It's a great title.
The author paints this incredible cinematic picture of kids skateboarding on the concrete steps outside Sydney Smith Hall at the University of Toronto. These adolescent boys are getting a running start, jumping onto these thick tubular iron handrails, sliding down at breakneck speed.
Just fearless.
And sometimes they land gracefully, and sometimes they wipe out incredibly painfully, slamming into the concrete, and they just shake it off, limp back up the stairs, and do it again.
It is a profound, almost primal display of developing competence in the face of physical danger.
But then, the university administration comes along and installs skate stoppers, those little metal brackets welded onto the handrails, to completely stop them from grinding. Now, on the surface, if you ask the administration, they will say it's just a safety measure or it's to protect the property. It sounds perfectly reasonable, but the psychological analysis here cuts so deep.
Yes, the text employs a psychological heuristic that it attributes to Carl Jung, describing it as Jung's most surgically wicked psychoanalytic tool.
I love this part.
The rule is this: if you cannot understand why someone did something, look at the consequences of their action and infer the motivation from those consequences.
That is a devastating tool to use on people's behavior.
It cuts right through rationalizations. So what is the consequence of installing those skate stoppers? The consequence is that highly skilled, courageous adolescent males are frustrated, blocked, and prevented from testing their physical limits and developing mastery over danger.
Yeah.
Therefore, the text argues the true subconscious motivation of the administration wasn't merely a concern for safety. The motivation was an insidious, anti-human spirit that resents competence, resents masculinity, and resents strength. It's a desire to flatten everything into a sterile, perfectly controlled, risk-free environment.
It's the overprotective urge gone completely toxic, and the author uses a classic piece of Americana to illustrate the antidote to this, the old comic book advertisement for Mac.
Oh yeah, Charles Ellis.
Right. Mac is the scrawny, weak kid who gets sand kicked in his face at the beach by a massive bully. What is the heroic response? Mac doesn't retreat to his basement in his underwear to play video games, demand that the beach be declared a safe space, and drown in resentment toward bullies.
No, he doesn't.
Mac embraces the danger, he lifts weights, he disciplines his body, he gets strong, and he goes back to the beach to confidently face the bully.
And the profound psychological truth embedded in that simple comic book story and in the behavior of the skateboarding kids is that human beings are fundamentally not built to be perfectly safe.
We're not.
We are not designed to live in a padded room. We are evolutionary creatures built to encounter the unknown, to face danger, and to master it. Overprotecting youth, wrapping them in metaphorical bubble wrap, deprives them of the exact mechanism by which they achieve mastery, transcend their own biological limitations, and develop the thick skin needed to survive.
Absolutely.
When you stop children from taking calculated risks, you do not make them safe. You make them weak, anxious, and completely unprepared for the real chaos of adult life.
You cannot protect them from the dragon, so you have to teach them how to wield a sword. Wow. Okay, we are approaching the philosophical summit of the source material here. We're moving into how we communicate truth and the ultimate meaning of this entire struggle.
Rule 9.
Yes. The author proposes a rule for conversation. Assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. He points out something fascinating about his own profession, psychotherapy. Most people think therapy is going to a wise doctor who gives you brilliant advice to fix your life.
Right. But the text argues that advice is usually what you get when someone just wants you to shut up and go away, or when they want to revel in the superiority of their own intelligence.
Yeah, we've all been on the receiving end of that.
True psychotherapy and true meaningful conversation of any kind is based on active, dedicated listening. And listening serves a highly specific evolutionary and psychological function. The listening person acts as a real-time representative of the broader human crowd.
Which loops perfectly back to what we said earlier about outsourcing our sanity.
Precisely. When you talk, you are not just transmitting data. You're testing your thoughts and your rationalizations against the immediate reactions of the listener. You are closely watching their facial expressions. A raised eyebrow, a subtle nod, a genuine laugh, a look of confusion or disgust.
We're constantly reading the room.
You use those micro-reactions to continuously calibrate your own behavior and your own internal beliefs. If you say something you think is brilliant and the crowd, represented by the listener, is visibly taken aback or offended, you are forced to reevaluate your own sanity. But this incredible feedback loop only works if both parties are genuinely engaged in a mutual pursuit of truth, humbly assuming that the other person has reached careful conclusions through their own suffering that might save them the pain of making a catastrophic mistake.
It's the difference between actually communicating to solve a problem and just waiting for your turn to speak so you can prove you're right. Which brings us to the core axiom of the entire book, the grand synthesis. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. That's rule 7.
Yes.
We've established the baseline, life is suffering. To survive that suffering without turning into the resentful mass shooter, humanity had to learn a massive evolutionary trick. We had to learn how to delay gratification.
A huge leap.
We learned that we could bargain with the future.
Yeah.
We learned to sacrifice the fleeting pleasures of today for the security and prosperity of tomorrow.
And this massive evolutionary leap created a vertical moral hierarchy in human behavior. At the very bottom of that hierarchy is expedience. Expedience is following blind, animalistic impulse. It's taking the easy way out in every situation. Expedience is hiding the skeletons in the closet because confronting them is uncomfortable. It's lying on your resume to get the job you want, avoiding difficult conversations with your spouse, and shrugging off personal responsibility.
To use a visceral metaphor, expedience is covering the blood you just spilled with a rug instead of doing the hard work of scrubbing the floor clean.
It works for 5 minutes, but eventually the smell of the rot takes over the whole house.
Yeah.
But meaning. Meaning is the exact opposite of that cowardly expedience.
What is it then?
Meaning is the ultimate dynamic balance between chaos and order. The text describes meaning not just as a fleeting emotion or a temporary feeling of happiness. Meaning is a tangible, almost physical reality that emerges when all the complex levels of being are perfectly aligned.
Wow.
It happens when your atomic microcosm, your cellular health, your psychological state, your individual actions, your role in society, and the structure of the cosmos itself arrange themselves in perfectly functioning harmony. Meaning is the deep, profound neurological signal from the very depths of your nervous system telling you that you are in the exact right place at the exact right time, doing exactly what you should be doing to facilitate the betterment of the world.
It's that transcendent feeling when you are completely, wholly engrossed in something incredibly difficult but undeniably worthwhile. And the anxiety fades and time itself just vanishes.
Exactly. And this raises an important question, perhaps the ultimate philosophical question posed by the entire body of source material. What would actually happen to the world if everyone stopped hiding behind their convenient life lies?
Oh, man.
What would happen if every single individual stopped acting expediently, cleaned up their own room, sorted out their family dynamics, spoke the absolute truth without trying to manipulate others, and aimed their perception at the highest possible good they could conceive of?
It's a staggering thought experiment.
The author suggests that if we found the courage to do this, we could collectively reduce the immense amount of unnecessary suffering that poisons the world. We could steer humanity away from the hell of totalitarianism and nihilistic resentment, and we could actually bring about something resembling heaven on earth.
So as we wrap up this journey, what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Well,
Why does 12 Rules for Life matter so much? Because if you are out there feeling completely overwhelmed by the dizzying, chaotic complexity of the modern world,
And a lot of us are.
if you feel adrift without moral structure, or if you are being constantly beaten down by a vicious internal critic that tells you you aren't enough, this material offers a profound lifeline. It isn't just a list of arbitrary commands from a strict professor.
No, not at all.
It is a distillation of thousands of years of practical, biological, and mythological wisdom, beautifully disguised as simple rules. It reminds us that human beings are incredibly robust. We are capable of carrying an incredibly heavy load, and that voluntarily picking up that heavy load and carrying it forward is precisely what gives our lives deep, unshakable meaning.
It demands that we look at that murky, shifting, often terrifying map of reality, accept the existence of chaos and malevolence, and courageously step forward to establish order and truth anyway.
Because even when the map is muddy and the lines aren't clear, we still have to navigate the world. We have to live.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. If you want to keep exploring the world's most transformative books with us, please hit that subscribe button so you never miss a journey into the Book Nook.
The pursuit of wisdom and meaning is a collective endeavor, and we are grateful you're on the path with us.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one.